If you would like to support the podcast and get some extra content while you're there, head on over to patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast and sign up. From the rewatch to the Q&A, we will have loads of content every week. So sign up, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. And now, here's the podcast. Welcome everybody. It's episode 403 of the Severe MMA podcast. My name is Sean O'Sheacon, and for the week we have in it, we're going to talk a lot about Irish MMA. We have Bellator 291 coming up. We're going to break down that whole card. And you know what? We'll see how it goes. But maybe just that whole card. We have the takeaways coming on Tuesday morning as well. Anyway, so they'll be breaking down all the UFC. But we're going to concentrate on the Irish MMA scene and the big Irish MMA card coming up next week on this podcast. And myself and Graeme are here to do that. Before we get into all of that, we must tell you that this episode of our beautiful podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Manscaped. And everyone probably knows Manscaped by now, but they have some absolutely fantastic products. They have the new Beard Hedge Trimmer Pro Kit, as well as the Lawnmower 4.0 and all that great stuff. The Beard Hedger Pro Kit, the Beard Hedger itself, it's a cordless trimmer and has a rotary wheel with 20 hair cutting lengths, all in one guard. So no more messy drawers full of all this kits. It's available over in the US and Canada and a few more places as well at the moment. You can get all those brilliant products over on manscaped.com, and you can use the promo code SevereMMA for 20% off plus free shipping right now. That beard hedger is the ultimate tool to get you looking absolutely brilliant. 7 million men worldwide already trust Manscaped with their balls, so it's time to trust them with their hair up top too. Manscaped, they've taken your grooming game to the next level, and now it's to take it a level after that. Again with the Beard Hedger, it's an electric beard hair trimmer and a premium sculpting machine. As I said, all on one guard, leaving little mess, and it's waterproof too. But it doesn't end there. They have created 4 dermatologist tested formulations: the shampoo, the conditioner, the beard oil, and the beard balm, which are really great. The beard balm itself, it caps off the kit with pomades, the shape, styles, moisturizer your hair. Before that, you have the beard oil, will take away the brittleness, and the shampoo and the conditioner to get it feeling clean. Get it clean first, and then get it feeling absolutely good. It reduces ingrown hairs, replaces natural oils, and promotes beard health as well. So the Beard Hedger Pro Kit comes with 3 free gifts: a brush, comb, and scissors to ensure you have all the tools for everything you need, as well as the Lawnmower 4.0 and that kit. That is absolutely everything you need as well. From first impression to last, you're going to absolutely love it. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code SevereMMA at manscaped.com. It's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the code SevereMMA. Spice up your life with Manscaped. 1 stroke, 1 guard, 20 lengths on that beautiful beard hedger from Manscaped. Right, Graeme, let's talk about it. Bellator 291. Look, I suppose we'll in the negatives first, and then we'll give the 95% of this podcast with positives, I suppose.
Trust you to start off with the negatives.
I want to kind of get them out of the way. But look, the negatives are, I suppose, that maybe this isn't the card that the Irish fan base would have wanted. I think there's probably maybe only like 2 or 3 fights at the top of this card. The ones maybe lower down are okay, but and 2 or 3 is probably a stretch that people actually would have really enjoyed. I think the Pedro Carvalho versus Jeremy McKinley fight is good. I think the Sinead Kavanagh Janae Harney fight is grand, I think, in terms of the matchmaking. But after that, you're hoping for a big fight for Brian Moore. We didn't get it. You're hoping for a James Gallagher big fight. You didn't get that. And obviously James is injured now and out of his fight. And well, I don't know if he's injured now. That hasn't been announced yet, but it seems like he's injured and out of his fight. And looking forward to seeing James back when he can get back. Leah McCourt is the biggest fighter for life. She's not on this card. And, you know, the main event is maybe a surprising one. And, you know, we don't have the likes of MVP. We don't have any of the big names over here. And I think it was a little bit disappointing, the Carl Moore fight. I think a lot of people made no sense. I was talking to John Kavanagh last week, and he kind of made sense of it, and he did a good job, to be fair of it. You know, Richie Smullen's in a very tough matchup. Charlie Ward kind of buried down the card, even though it is a good fight. I just think it felt like every announcement was like a little bit more disappointing for Irish MMA fans, when it's usually the opposite. Now, I think this is kind of the first time we've had this. Now, we've had where we've love fights, and then it's like, okay, maybe it needs one or two more. Maybe we were missing something. But I don't think we've ever had a card like this before, where like everything that gets announced, people are like, really? Is that really what's happening? Are you really giving Carl Moore this fight after he just beat that guy? Are you really matching Brian Moore against that guy when he was supposed to be matched against the guy who's around the top, and they both agree to it? Are you like, is that really the main event? It was one of those ones, and I think it just gave a real negative feel to the card. Now, I think that will probably change, and it will change here in the next 2 or 3 minutes when we start talking positively about it. But that, to me, has been the way that card has felt to me. But not only to me, you know, talking to the people over in our Patreon group, seeing people's reaction on Twitter, seeing the fans' reaction and talking to them about it, seems like it's been that way. For you, Graeme, is that the way you've kind of felt about it too, or have you been maybe more positive than the all-round feeling?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it before, like the maybe the positioning of the card is surprising, and obviously James, as you mentioned, that fight is off now, but not having that on the card was a bit of a strange one. So there were a couple of kind of grumblings that I saw about strange decisions, but like, you know, looking at the card, there is like a pretty good stretch, starting with like, you know, Brian Moore, Carl Moore, Kenny, Kieran Clark, Peter, and Sinead, and then Pedro in the co-main event. Like, so like if some wins start going off there, you know, they could get pretty exciting. But I do expect the card to be exciting, but I do know what you mean. There definitely could have been a bit more, and you know, if the Pedro Carvalho Jeremy Kennedy fight is like you know, isn't a very exciting one, I actually expect it to be an exciting one, but you might see some fans start to flood out. You know, after that fight's over, even though obviously the Bellator title is on the line in the main event, we've seen before like kind of big fights for promotion that aren't big fights on local territory, kind of, you know, the crowds empty out, and it, you know, maybe that will happen, maybe it won't, but obviously because it's a title fight, they've put it at the top of the card. But I think the Irish fans would have been happier with an Irish guy at the top of the card.
Yeah, I think. Look, the other one
we sound a bit like spoiled, where we're like, yeah, we don't want this title fight at the top of our card, but like I think that's how people feel.
It is. We're only telling it how it is here. Like, I think it's like having watched back.
Like, I'm actually really looking forward to Amosov and
me too.
Story,
yeah,
but,
especially
like,
having watched
just the
reaction
of the people that we've seen.
100%. Especially having watched back their first fight, I'm really looking forward, and we will get in and break it down. But we have to be honest. I saw a lot of people kind of saying, you know, I'll wait for Cage Words, I'll wait for the next Bellator, I'll wait for Katie Taylor is going to be fighting in 2 months' time, I'll wait for that, I'll wait for the PFL kind of thing. And there has been a lot of that, so it'll be interesting to see the crowd as well. The one thing I suppose Bellator would point to, and maybe other people would point to as well, is Mousasi and Austin Vanderford fought in the main event recently, and I don't think there was a massive upheaval of people for that fight. I think there have been other fights recently where people have left, but before the main event. And maybe that's because it's Mousasi and it's the name. You know, Yamasov and Storley are not the names of them, even though at this stage in their career they're probably better fighters. The winner will probably prove himself as that anyway, even though because Mousasi's getting a bit older. You know what I mean? I don't know if they'd a name draw to kind of hold people in, so it will be interesting, especially like Dublin people. And I don't know if you would agree with this, Graeme, or not, but Dublin people are like very picky about what they will actually like come out for and stay for. They'll be like, you know, the Lewis, we get the early Lewis home, like, or we, you know, I do you agree with that, Graeme? That people are a little bit like that. Like a lot of the SBG crowd could come in and leave after Pedro. Like, we saw Pedro, we saw our SBG guy. Now, good luck. You know, I'm going to way home.
Well, it's a long night of like Irish fights, and if you're there from the start watching Irish fights, and you're not like a hardcore MMA fan, you're just kind of like, you know, a part of the gym, or you know, if you the fighters or things like that, you know, you're definitely, you know, be understandable if after 4 hours or whatever it is, 5-6 hours of MMA that you say, oh, I've seen enough, and you go home. for the hardcore fans, obviously they'll like this main event, but you know, when you're selling out whatever 9 or 10,000 people in the 3 arena, or hoping to anyway, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't hardcore MMA fans there, and if they all leave, it will look half empty. We've seen it before.
Yeah, and I think, you know, this is a weird thing to say, but I know a lot of people who've been at recent MMA cards, and it's not just Bellator, just so happens Bellator have been there a lot. There's been a lot of like, you know, it's not been that easy to sit in the crowd and watch the cards, let's say, if we put it that way. There's been a lot of people like heavily intoxicated in one thing or another, let's put it that way.
Old man Shia.
No, but
moaning about people having fun again. Here we go.
Yeah, but I think sometimes it can go a little bit overboard, and you know, people don't really like that as well, and that, you know, that could be an excuse for it. Do you want to get caught out with a lot of fucking, you know, drugged up louts at the end of it?
Same shit that goes on with the rugby. They're always like, oh, people are coming in for points and getting.
It's not just points. The points are fine. But it's the rest. I think they need to put fucking spikes in the back of the toilets inside in the 3 arena at times. I think there's not a bit of that. But yeah, I don't know. The cards have kind of gone from a really exciting experience for a lot of people, I think, to think that like some people, I think, might be better off avoiding, if you get me, like, and I think them are not better off.
Part of that, I think, is though that they're coming with regularity, and you know, it's not like with the UFC where if they come now and they might not come for another 5, 6, 7 years. With Bellator, you kind of know they're coming back, so if you're not particularly excited about the card, you might be like, oh, let's catch the next one. Yeah, because you kind of assume they'll be back quick enough.
Yeah, and if they don't really care about the actual card that's happening as well, they'll make their own fun, I suppose. But yeah, anyway, we'll leave the negativity there. We'll end it there. But we'll see how it happens, and we'll report back. Obviously next week I'll be up in Dublin on Thursday. I'll be there Thursday, Friday for the weigh-ins, and Saturday for the card as well. So a lot of coverage coming over in SevereMMA. If you haven't signed up for our YouTube yet, now will probably be the week, honestly, on our Patreon as well. It will be a good place to be as well this week. Let's get into the card. And I suppose, Graeme, we'll go from the bottom to the top. And there's a few fights on the card that we won't get into massively here. Stephen Hill against Joel Kuja, Kazan Meghamad Sharapov, obviously the brother of Zabit, fighting Rafael Hudson, who fought Kieran Clark last time out and had a really, really good showing there. Lena Klidu against Jenna Bishop, and Oleg Popov against Gökhan Sakaram as well. Although that's a big heavyweight fight, Gökhan Sakaram has fought a couple of times in Dublin now and has got a couple of big knockouts. So that's that's an interesting fight, but one we're not going to concentrate massively on here because we're keeping an eye, I suppose, on the Irish guys as well. Let's start with and the guys fighting out of Ireland. Asel Ajouj, he's fighting Liam McCracken. I know Harry has spoken to Liam. I think it was Ian was on that spoke to Asiel. Two guys who have a lot of talk behind them, a lot of hype behind them for younger guys coming up, you know, similar enough sort of records, but 4-1 against 3-0. I interviewed Peter Queely there a couple of months ago. I asked him who's the up and coming guy at profession in the gym who you would say to look out for, and he told me the guy is Asiel. He is the guy coming up. So, you know, I watched him obviously fight a couple of times. His kickboxing looks really, really good, obviously coming from that background, and you know, his fight against Konstantin Blanita when they were both 0-0 was the most high level 0-0 fight I think anyone could ever see. It was that good, honestly. I remember thinking after, and I said it on the podcast as well, about how good that was. And then you look at McCracken from the other side of it as well. He's a guy, you know, look at these 3 wins, ground and pound, rear naked choke first round, rear naked choke first round. So, you know, he can fight all around, but I guarantee you he'll be looking to get this fight to the ground against Asiel and try to submit him. And Asiel, I'm sure, will be looking to keep it on the feet and get a big knockout there. It's an interesting fight, Graeme. And
it's important to mention, though, that he has an extensive amateur record where he's been rounds. You know, 100%. He hasn't just been in there and finished people in the first round and hasn't really been tested in that situation. He's actually been fighting for many years at amateur and has been to decisions and has, you know, earned his crust before turning pro and has been in the game a little longer than Asiel.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that is a big thing as well. We've talked about that. I actually talked about it with Kieran Clark and John. We look at it with Christian Leroy Duncan, a guy who's gone to to the UFC now, who's had a long background in amateur fighting before. That's a very important thing. And I think for him coming in here, that's great. But for SL as well, I think it's an interesting fight because this is the first time I think a lot of people are kind of building the hype around SL. You know, obviously when I do an interview and I ask someone like Peter Queally, who is the guy, and he says that builds it a little bit. He talks to him, put out clips. That builds a little bit. He's out there and he's won 4 fights, won 4 in a row after Constantine Benita fight. That builds another little bit, and it builds and builds and builds. So, and this is how fighters, I suppose, get that reputation and keep going. And
yeah, you forgot about me picking him to beat Jordan Martin in his last fight. But, that obviously builds the hype massively.
The Graeme
sound the alarm. He's given the stamp of approval.
The Graeme roll. But yeah, big fight for SL. Look forward to seeing him. Darragh Kelly against Darvell Jordan. Then, you know, this is a fight. I said this a couple of times now. I must go back and check. And it was a fight that was talked about before and didn't end up happening, or it was. Maybe it's just been out there for such a long time that I kind of half forgot about it. But you know, Darragh Kelly now has had 2 fights. Darvell Jordan is 4 fights into his career and 2-2. But he won his last one out there in the summer, I suppose, of last year. I'm very interested to see this for one reason only, and it's for 2 reasons. Darragh Kelly, first of all, is moving down from 155 pounds to 145 pounds, and if anyone has seen Darragh Kelly recently at any of his fights, I don't know, and maybe it's just me because I was one of the only ones at the fucking last couple of weigh-ins. But this guy is an absolute brick shithouse. Like
his arms are just fucking
massive.
Cement blocks.
He's one of those guys you look at and like think, whatever weight he's at, how the fuck is he making that weight? Just because he's so muscular. And now he's cutting down another 10 pounds to make 145 again. Like I don't know, is it a good idea? Maybe he had too much muscle. He's feeling that. Maybe his team are feeling that. It'll be interesting to see how he looks. Maybe he'll be more, you know, svelte, or maybe he'll be even more muscular. You never know. But that was shocking to me because I broke this fight, I believe, and I had to ask a couple of times, is this actually gone to 145? And it is. So we'll see how that looks for Darragh Kelly. But also, after his last fight, I loved the way he spoke, because I was sitting with you, Graeme, watching the fight, and I was kind of saying, Jesus, Darragh's not performing well here. I think, you know, he's only 2 fights into his career, but we'll have to kind of readjust how we're looking at Darragh, and it's going to take a lot of improvements. And then he came out and said the same thing. He's like, I can't believe I performed that way. I'm never going to perform like that again. And he was like, he said he had some issues coming into it, but I'm not losing an excuse.
We were talking about it cage side. He looks hesitant. He looks unsure. He looks a little like delay here and there, where usually throughout his like amateur career, and you know, obviously his first fight was quick in Bellator against Junior Morgan, but he didn't look himself. And you know, as you said, it was good to hear him kind of see it the same way. And you know, sometimes they say, "Oh, a loss teaches you everything," but going in there and not performing, even if you win, can be a huge thing for learning. And as you said, though, this 145 cut, I don't know about that. Like, Jesus Christ, like maybe he didn't have a nutritionist before, and now he does, and he can do it properly or something. But that's a big cut for such a big guy, as you mentioned. And you know, first fight at a different weight class, cutting extra weight, that could pose problems.
Yeah,
but, yeah, like, you know, you never really know until you do the cut, but. Yeah, that would be definitely a factor.
100%. And like a lot of this is a mental thing as well, like the mentality to get that weight down, the mentality to do things right throughout camp. You know, he doesn't exactly look like a guy who physically has any problems, if you want to put it that way. I don't think he's out eating fucking breakfast rolls and burgers and chips by the looks of him. But like, and I think it's a positivity with the mentality side of it as well, because like the best thing, look, you can get over a bad performance, right? But you can only get over a bad performance if you're mentally correct, and if you can like actually realize that you had a bad performance. Like, I hate to use the example, but Paddy Pimblett recently, like, he had a really bad performance against Jared Gordon, and it feels like just he never mentally accepted he had a bad performance. That happens so many times. Like, the people don't mentally.
It's just haters. Yeah,
exactly. But like you see the top guys in the world. The 2 examples I'm going to give are Dominic Cruz and Conor McGregor. they're both guys that have lost and came out straight away afterwards and said, look, this is the reason I lost. I didn't prepare properly in this way. I didn't do this right. He did this right, and I'm going to have to adjust, or I didn't, it's, they front up to it immediately, and it change things, and mentality monsters, to quote Jurgen Klopp, to realise exactly what you've done wrong and be able to change it and go in. And Dara Kelly had that immediately after the fight. And for a guy so young and a fighter so young in his career to have that to me is a better sign than the bad performance is a bad sign, if you want to put it that way. And I was going to be very critical of that bad performance, to be honest, because you were sitting alongside me, Graeme, there's no height there. I was like, geez, that's not great. But that mentality it was almost worth the bad performance, and he got the win as well. So he won and learned so that one. So looking really looking forward to seeing Dara Kelly, new weight class, and I'm expecting a big performance out of him as well. So very interesting there.
If he does make the weight successfully and without problems, he's going to be really strong at 145. If he can get a hold of people. So if this weight code works out, then 145 could be a brilliant weight class for him.
100%. Norbert Navini Jr. is returning as well. He's taking on Andy Manzolo. I think that's the second time I've done that in previous already for this card.
Oh, Mandy.
You came and you gave, come on, Graeme, without taking, and you sent me away. Oh, Mandy. No, you're not singing, no? No? Yeah, I think you've muted your mic there. Right? Anyway, I am a massive fan of Norbert Navini. Now, he's coming back from well over a year out with a torn ACL, I believe it was. Just a fantastic fighter. His father, obviously Norbert Navini as well, was, I think he was an ex-wrestler, but he's over at London Shoot. His wrestling is insane. His striking is insane. Talking to Will Fleury a few weeks ago, and he kind of briefly mentioned the fight, but he was kind of saying I went in there against Norbert Navini and got absolutely fucking destroyed. And that was only in Norbert's third fight or something like that. And Will had an awful lot of fights before that. Now Will's gone out there and he's fighting in the PFL tournament against Amari Ekmadov. And fair play to Will for getting that massive fight as well. But that just shows you, and I think Will would agree with me, the level that Norbert Navini was at and hopefully still is at. You never know after such a bad injury like that, but I'm so excited to come to see him coming back. What do you think of the injury, Graeme? I know a big Liverpool fan. You've had a few lads recently. Virgil van Dijk coming back after an ACL injury and not really being the same after it. It's tough to come back and be 100% after an injury like that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Like I've injured my ACL, two surgeries on my ACL to repair it, and even when they say it's like good to go, it is hard to trust it. 100% for a while, and it does feel strange, and it can feel kind of loose. It can go kind of a little bit numb, and it can be like what they call a Baker's cyst at the back and stuff. And it's always in your head a little bit as well. Like even if it is like safe to play the sport or to fight on it or whatever, so it could be a factor. But once you're in there and you're trading blows, maybe that the adrenaline and all that goes out of your head, and but it's definitely could be a factor. As you said, in football these days, a lot of players come back a lot better with the involvement of physios and the surgeries and all that treatment for athletes and stuff is much improved. But still, these major injuries are, with some guys, they come back from the same as before. Some guys, they come back a little bit less. Some guys, they come back and they're never the same. So there always is that risk. But he's coming in here against a guy who is, he's had 35 fights. He's 26-9. But looking at his recent record, his last win was over a guy who's 2-2. His win before that was over a guy who's 3-26. His win before that was 9-1 guy, and then he lost to Charlie Ward. And before that, he fought a 16-24 guy. Before that, he lost to a 5-6 guy. He's, for some reason, he's an experienced fighter with a decent record on paper. But if you look a bit deeper into it, he maybe has been padding that record a lot. So hopefully, Norbert is back to what we saw before, and I expect him to be. But there definitely is that small bit of doubt, obviously coming off a major injury. But I think he should have more than enough to get this done. Yeah,
I think it's a good matchup for Norbert coming back. It looks good on Norbert's record. He's fighting a guy with 35 fights and a lot of them wins, even though maybe
until you click on his record.
Okay, yeah.
At a glance, it'll pass.
You get Sherlock more clicks. I'll be fine to do that. Yeah. Charlie Ward and Mike Shipman. Then this is, You know, this is probably.
Why is this like buried on the card? This could even be the main event.
It could be, yeah. This is probably like okay, after the top 2 fights and maybe even the top 3 fights, you know, Sinead and Janae ranked pretty hard as well. This is the most high level fight on this card. Like, this is a top fight. Both guys have been ranked recently. Both guys maybe even still ranked, are they? And, you know, very, very good fighters like Mike Shipman. And look, Charlie as well in his last fight. It was probably only 1-2 fights away from a title shot. So, you know, with a win here, both are back in that mix. They win one fight and they're back in it. Like, the divisions in Bellator aren't.
It wasn't the Shipman Edwards decision the one that a lot of people disputed.
It was. And I remember Garrett A was asking Mike Shipman about the decision and things like that, but it was a very close fight indeed. It was, yeah. And like, the Fabian and Charlie fight was a bit weird as well, like, where Fabian didn't exactly blow him away and Charlie was like roaring at him in the middle of the fight. Safe, in
an unexpected way with implementing more grappling, but that kind of just shows the respect he had for Charlie Ward's game, you know. Yeah. Charlie Ward's been on a good streak, you know. Obviously the UFC didn't really go that well for him. It was a couple of, like, you know, the kind of way he kind of landed on his head unluckily, it just didn't work out, and maybe it was a bit too early, or maybe on another night it could have went differently, but he put it together a streak and, you know, went in there against Fabian Edwards. And obviously Fabian Edwards, we've talked about him a lot in the podcast for a lot of years, even when he was an amateur, and he's a really well-rounded guy. And, you know, Charlie brought it to him, and, you know, it was a good performance, but he just, you know, was you know, beaten by the better guy on the night. And it's surprising that they've just kind of buried him on the card here. And for both guys, you know, it's just kind of flying under the radar completely, because it's not even on the main card. It's you know, it's just kind of thrown there. And maybe you know, Bellator in the past have changed up their cards kind of last minute, the cards order last minute, and maybe that will happen here and it get moved up onto the main card or something like that, because that would make a lot more sense. Yeah,
it probably would. But having said that as well, like, they love to have that Peter Queally fight up in the top of the card. They love the walkout being up there as well. The top 3, as I said, you know, they're probably immovable there, and they like having Kieran Clark as well.
What about the featured prelim as well? Then even, like,
that's what I was thinking. Yeah, like, but Carl Moore is there as well. Like, he deserves that spot.
Is it not Kenny and Craig McIntosh?
It's hard to know. I'll look it up here when we go. I know Bellator sent out a thing recently, but yeah, it is weird. All right, look, the placement of these Bellator cards is something that you look at it initially and it doesn't make sense, but then you kind of look further into it. Like the Kieran Clark fight is probably the one you'd say, okay, it's a good fight and all that, but maybe that can be moved down a bit. But Kieran Clark sells a lot of tickets, and they like to have his fight right up there. So I'm just looking at the card here now again. So
the fact that his fight kind of fell apart and had to be rematched
that's
as well.
True as well. Yeah, that is true. Here's the order of the card from Bellator. So we've Amasov Storley, Carvalho Kennedy, Queally Logan actually is before Kavanagh Harding, and then Kieran Clark and Leonardo Sinis. Then at the top of that card, so this is the top of the card, and this makes a bit more sense. Carl Moore against Magic Krasansky, Charlie Ward and Mike Shipman is next there, so that's, you know, fair enough.
Oh yeah, actually, discard what I said a minute ago.
And then we have the Sakaram fight, then the Novinia fight, then Brian Moore, Richie Smuller and Nijelski, Kelly against Dorval, Assel against McCracken, the Kalandu Bishop fight, Makahana fight, Skatizi fight, Hill and Magomed Sharapov. So yeah, I'd say there might be a little bit of a late arriving crowd there with those first 2 fights on this, but look, we'll see how that goes, I suppose. But yeah, look, to get back to, I suppose, to the Charlie and Shipman fight before we move on from it, this is really a fight I think, like, one guy will probably have the better of it in the striking, and the other guy will probably go for a takedown, I think, because Charlie's strike with you, but if he wants to, he will take you down. I think Shipman is the type of guy as well, he'll strike with you, and if he wants to, he'll take you down. So
I think we could even see a back and forth of both if the fight goes long, which you could easily.
It could be. It's an interesting, and both have the power as well to knock the other guy out. I think it's a very even fight. There's a couple of fights in this card where you're kind of like, I'll wait until the betting odds come out. They haven't come out yet to kind of give my pick, because, like, if one of these lads is plus 300, I think you're probably going, well, if I'm betting on it, I'll probably bet on that guy. Where right now, if you were to give me a tenner, I don't know who I'd put it on. Like it's a very, very close fight, and I think you could call it right down the middle. The hometown will help Charlie as well. I'm sure he'll have a big crowd of fans in there, and the SBG crowd always get behind him. And Charlie having been known as obviously a very close friend of Conor down through the last decade, the crowd will be bang up for Charlie as well. So very, 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 very big fight there for both guys. The undercard, maybe non-hyped fight of the night, I think, is Richie Smullen against Peter Nijelski. This is a fucking fantastic fight. Nijelski, if people might remember the name, he's the guy who beat Pedro Carvalho. Just after Carvalho had that massive win, and just before he had that massive win, and then it was a close decision, and everyone was giving out about the matchmaker, which I think was probably right. But anyway, that was Nijelski's last win. Very strong wrestler, good all-around fighter, 21 fights in, and he's fighting Richie Smullen, who was in the UFC, in Bellator, got away from both of them, went out and he won titles at 2 weight classes, and has looked very, very good since his last Bellator fight in 2020. And that Bellator fight in 2020, he beat Harry Hardwick, who's now probably the number 1 contender in Cage Warriors for the 145-pound belt. So it's not exactly as if, he hasn't been beaten or fighting good guys down through the years, because he absolutely has.
Richie Smullen, he hasn't backed down from a fight at all.
100%.
Like, he's fought, even at amateur, he fought Paul Hughes, beat Paul Hughes in a decision. When he turned pro, he went in there against his third fight. He went in there against Reese McKee at Bama at 30 and fought to a draw. Sean Tobin, he might not be the biggest name, but like Irish MMA fans will know how tough a fight he is. Beat him by rear naked choke in the first round. You mentioned Harry Hardwick, going in there against good guys all the time, and this is another big step up. And he got unfortunate. He was on the Ultimate Fighter, and there was a problem when he was weight cutting. His body kind of shut down on him, and it was a bit of a disaster for him. You're going over there to the Ultimate Fighter. You're expecting your kind of dreams to come true. You're going to be in the UFC, and something kind of out of your control happens, and you're fucking back to square one. And he's rebuilt brilliantly. Went in there and beat Harry Hardwick in Bellator, and You'd probably expect him to get more Bellator fights, get a decent Bellator contract, but no, he has to go out and he has to fight, abroad, and picks up 2 good wins, good finishes, 3 good wins, good finishes, and he's back in Bellator against a really good guy, as you mentioned. And Richie Smullen's been really flying under the radar, but this could be the night where he really announces himself.
It really could be. It really, really could be, because he had that Albert Diaz split decision loss. It was, it was a good fight, but maybe the result maybe dampened it a little bit. The Harry Hardwick fight, it was a good fight, but it was in 2020 and it was at a weird time, and then he was out about it. This is the run for him, I think. And if he can go in there and he can beat Nijelski, I don't know if people will still appreciate it, but we'll fucking appreciate it. And I think a lot of people in the know will absolutely appreciate it if he gets to win here, and it's a massive fight. Because this, I don't think people realise how fucking tough of a fight this is. For both guys, it's a tough fight for Nijelski, and it's a tough fight for Richie Smullen as well. But what if we criticised it at the start, some of the matchmaking and stuff here. And, maybe it's a little bit tough of matchmaking for Richie Smullen coming back in. But, Richie's not one of those guys, as we just said, that takes fucking easy fights. And this is not an easy one. But what a fight. This is going to be an absolute battle. If this hits the ground, I think the one, I think, thing here for Nijelski is, right, you take Richie Smullen down, it's not going to be as simple as like taking him down, holding him down, because 1, he's really good jiu-jitsu, and 2, he has unbelievable fucking work ethic and cardio. Like talking,
extremely strong as well.
Very strong. I think it was Will Fleury was saying, like, Richie Smullen, they almost have to hold him back. He trains so much, nearly too much.
He'd run himself into a wall if you let him, yeah.
Yeah, you've experienced that as well, have you? I'd say, watching him in the gym, have you?
Well, you just hear about him, he's one of those guys. I think Peter Queally will come on to as another guy who will just push himself, and maybe sometimes, I'm not sure about particularly for their camps, but in camps where you do push yourself too hard, you can kind of burn out and before the fight and go in there kind of, having already peaked before in the camp, and that's not what you want. So, you do have to pull back the reins on it a little bit, but Richie Smullen definitely puts in the work. He just doesn't shy away from it in any way. He's always there training, and he's always, this is, guys like him, this is their life, and this is everything to them. And as you said earlier about somebody else, he's not sitting around eating junk food or anything like that. He's not even eating his own chicken fingers. That he said, Richie's chicken fingers business that he has.
How far is that away from the Tree Arena? Because I would mind trying.
I think it's a portable. It's like it moves around. I think.
Oh, bring it out to the fucking Tree Arena there. So. Park it in front of the Gibson. I'll get someone.
You probably have to pay a shitload, dude, to park it there. I don't know. Maybe you don't.
It's Dublin.
Get it up there and have it ready to go. Have a few lads keeping sketch.
I don't need your fucking excuses.
Pay a couple of young Dublin kids to do look out for you.
Yeah, get a couple of young lads from the gym there up, and they'll fucking look out. If there's any guards coming to have a word with them, like to drive away, it'll be fine. But yeah, I want to bring me in a few of them, Graeme. Sure, you're in Dublin, you can just drive around and bring me out a few.
I've actually never had them, but like on our town Lobov's story for about fucking 100 days in a row, he was there eating them. So.
Artem fighting at heavyweight now. Unrelated Artem fighting. But yeah, no, I must try them. Jesus, they look nice. I know. Have you been to the Black Forge Inn as well? Is it nice? The food nice there and stuff?
Oh yeah, it actually is. It actually is really nice, and there's really nice cocktails as well. My wife really likes one of the cocktails there. I think she said it was her favorite cocktail, so we're gonna have to go back and get it. And when my cousin had the stout there, and he liked that as well. I'm not a stout guy. I don't like Guinness, or I can maybe have one, but then I feel kind of really full, and I can't really drink as much as I can't really drink like the way I'd like to. Then afterwards, I don't know. It just doesn't agree with me. But yeah, no, it's really nice, and I had a steak on a stone when I was there. Lovely, really good. Tasty.
I must try it out. Anyway, we'll move on. With Daniel Skitezi then against Dmitry Hirtsenko. Andy did an interview. I had Ian in my mind, like, no, wait, it's not Ian, it's Andy. He did an interview with Daniele, and it'd be very interesting to see his fight. Great win last time out against Stavi Gallon after losing to Vladimir Tokov, but he had 2 wins in a row before that. He's another guy, the level of matchmaking he's got has been very tough. Like, fought Alfie Davis, fought Charlie Leary, fought fucking Marvin Vittori in his 7th fight, back in what year was it? 2015. So he's had some very, very tough matchups, and he's a good record. He's beaten some good guys as well, but Gavin Hughes and a few others as well. But the Davy Gallon one was probably the best win, and if he gets another win here as well, he'll be stepping up and going forward. So a big win could be a big win for another SBG guy there. But let's talk about Brian Moore, Luca Ivan. Brian Moore was supposed to fight against what's his name? I just wrote a story about him yesterday, and I can't remember his name. Leandro Higo, yes.
Before you go on, it's like we say the same thing about Brian Moore before his fight all the time. It's like, what's going on here? Like,
I don't know, it's weird. So he agreed to fight Higo. Higo agreed to fight him. Scott Coker was asked about it, and he said yes, and then the fight didn't happen. It just felt like the most bizarre happening ever. I think James Galleron's up.
Well, if it wasn't Brian Moore, it'd be bizarre, but because it's Brian Moore, it's just the normal.
I don't know. It's weird because, like, Brian, we talked a minute ago about Kieran Clark, and we talk about him again. He has a big following from Drogheda that he brings down. Brian Moore has a fucking massive following from Wexford that he brings up. Bus loads of people. He was talking to Andy the other day, and that's not like, oh yeah, there's loads of people, I've bus loads of people. When you hear Brian Moore walking out, that's not the reaction of just, oh, it's the next SPG guy, it's, the next Irish guy with an Irish flag with a good song coming out. That's the reaction of a load of people from Wexford who fucking know Brian Moore, basically. This is, it's like Croke Park or wherever it might be, supporting their county. It's a different, you can just notice it, like, can't you? It's a
maybe people in like America wouldn't understand, or maybe people who are in really small towns in America would understand, but people from like the big cities wouldn't understand how kind of, a small community in where somewhere like Brian Moore and a lot of these guys are from, the local kind of celebrities will be kind of known by everybody. And like, if you're a professional athlete or whatever, you be like really well known and really well supported. Like, people really get behind their own in these small communities. And, as you said, they get the bus up, they pay the tickets, even if they're not interested in MMA, they just go there to support their guy.
That dog is at it again. I have 3 dogs inside here and they don't cause mad as your one.
Oh, he's such a loudmouth. Any kind of noise outside and he's like, yeah, what's happening? Let's go.
My 3 are the same as well. I just have to close the curtains and once I can't see it, that's it. Like there's no movement of it all. But I liked a little bit of dog in the background. Like my 3 are in here because I'm at home alone tonight, so I can't leave them inside. So there could be noises coming from them as well. So I won't give out too much. But anyway, back to Brian Moore. Yeah, it's true, and it's weird because it seems like they do understand it with Kieran Clark, and that's why he's getting the placement. Like Kieran's, still an up and comer, like, so it's not as if they need to put him there. There's a few other lads who are up and comers and very good fighters like him as well, who could as easily be chosen for that spot. But Brian Moore is a guy he's not an up and comer. Brian Moore is in the prime of his career, and now is the time to capitalise on what Brian Moore has been becoming for the last few years. And it just feels like he's got a couple of good fights, but and he's done well in them, and it's weird like that he just doesn't continue to get him. Like
you just can't catch a break.
No,
like,
he can't.
It's just ridiculous at this age. Like, he's lost close decisions. He's been offered fights and fights haven't happened. Like fights that he would want, fights that would put him in a good position, they haven't happened. He's been put on American cards when maybe the placement was a bit random. It's just he missed out on the kind of wave of Irish MMA years ago as well. Like, he's just kind of been, he hasn't been in the right place at the right time, and the promoter obviously in Bellator haven't really handled him the way that, like, I think a lot of people would agree that he should have been handled in terms of matchmaking and card placements and things like that. And it just continues on, and it's just, at this stage, it's not even unexpected. It's just it just seems like they just don't really have that much interest in Brian Moore for some reason.
I honestly think that Brian Moore going to the UFC right now would be perfect for everyone. Like, I think the UFC would love to have a fighter
if
like
he was
Brian
on
Moore.
tough, like that would actually really probably suit Brian Moore. But obviously it's hard to be away from his family, and he's a big family man and stuff like that. But I think is it only a month or is it 6 weeks, whatever? It's not that long.
Yeah, but even in, like, I think
it's not going to happen now. Obviously, it's definitely not going to happen. But things just haven't really worked out for Brian Moore, to no fault of his own, and not because of his fighting, which is unfortunate. But you can say that about a lot of guys. We've got an interview coming out soon with Ian O'Neill interviewing Franz Malambo, and he's going to tell everybody where he's been and how, like, how in MMA time can just kind of, you can just be in the wrong place at the wrong time and things like that, and it doesn't work out. And for Brian Moore, it just seems, as I keep saying, it just seems to be never ending with the kind of promotional malpractice, as Luke Thomas would say. Bellator have been doing him.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'd love to see Brian Moore win his next 2 fights. Let's say if he's 2 fights left in his contract. I think, actually, if I'm not mistaken, he had a new contract recently. Maybe I'm wrong on that. I'm not 100% sure. But let's say 2 fights left in his contract, win the 2 of them, and then go to UFC. Like, I think Brian Moore at this stage of his life, he's a good business, and I remember he's always saying, I'm just fighting out to be the best fighter in the world. I don't care about money or anything like that. Like, I'm sure Brian Moore would be happy to go in there and fight on the introductory contract to the UFC if he could earn that money along with his business and have a run at it. And I think, like, I really think, I don't know, it just feels like it'd be a better fit than him in Bellator, because it feels like Bellator have something and they don't realise what they have with Brian Moore, and that's a pity. But anyway, back to this fight.
It'll be hard enough to piss off Brian Moore, but in that interview we did that you mentioned with Andy, you can kind of see a slightly different, or hear a slightly different tone. He does seem to be a bit like, come on, like, he's been a really nice guy, and he's kind of, not really called out people and things like that. But I think maybe he's getting a bit pissed off with the situation, and thinks he deserves a bigger fight, and it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I'm looking at the Bellator media day availability, and he is there, to be fair. He's bottom of the list, so I almost didn't see it. It's on the next page. I was ready to give out to him, but he is there, and he has been made available. So, maybe we're being a bit unfair in Bellator, but the matchmaking is just, come on. Brian Moore is one of those special guys who, okay, maybe Brian Moore isn't going to fight for a championship in the next 2 or 3 fights. He'd have to take something big. He'd have to take a good few wins. But, like, he's a fan favourite. You can hear that. Anyone's been at any of the fights, you can hear the reception Brian Moore gets. And it feels like Brian
But
Moore
the thing is, Bellator know how good he is. Like, he went in there against McKee, like their main, prospect, their big guy.
He was brilliant against Lugo as well.
He looked great, and Lugo, and it's just fucking frustrating.
Very frustrating, very frustrating. And like Queally, they capitalised on that, and they went for it with Queally when he gave him any morsel of hope at all. And with Moore, they haven't, so I don't know. But this fight, look, it's an interesting one in terms of it should be a fun fight. It should be fun. Like, Luke Oveen will come out and he will throw big hands. He's a powerful guy. He can wrestle if he needs to wrestle. I think the big difference between these two guys is the technique and speed of Brian Moore is just way over and above that of Luca. Now, having said that, and I'm sure Brian or anyone will tell you this, if he lands a big shot, that won't matter. But the technique and speed will help him not take that big shot if you're looking at it from Brian Moore's side. So that's what he needs to avoid. He needs to avoid that big takedown, he needs to avoid that big shot, and I think he should really be boxing him up here. I think his technical ability is just brilliant. Like, Brian Moore, I know I said it before, and maybe people will say, "Oh, you're biased, an Irish guy," but I think Brian Moore is one of the best. Definitely one of the best 135 pounders in Bellator, and I'd put him up there, like, in the top 20, 25 maybe in the world. I think he's that good. Like, and I think even though he's been around for a good while, I think he's still improving all the time, and he could even get better and better over the next few years. But it'll only be in the next few years because he has been fighting for such a long time, and as you said, he's been around when the wave was coming up, and he's no spring chicken now at this stage at 35 years of age for a bantamweight.
So fighting for 12 years.
The next 2 years are massive for Brian Moore, and come on, Bellator, fucking capitalise him, especially if he wins here. Let's move him forward and let's get him into a big fight, or let him go to the fucking UFC otherwise. But anyway, we'll move on. Karl Moore and Rojanski. Look, when Karl Moore beat Karl Albrechtsen, I think we were all kind of saying, okay, it's moving time here now. He beat the number 7 guy in the world. I was looking at Anglickskis, who was number 6, thinking that's the perfect matchmaking here. You get him in there, beats him, and he's in for the title shot. Whereas John Kavanagh, when I spoke to him last week, he was kind of saying, look, Karl had to kind of prove himself by beating Albrechtsen, but Karl is still kind of coming back, and he's on his road to improving to become one of the best fighters in the world. He needs a couple of fights, and then let's put him back in that mix, and then he can prove he's championship worthy, or he's proved he's title worthy, which, it makes sense, I suppose, and it's a long-term goal than a short-term goal. But having said that, he's meeting a guy here who's fucking very good. Very, very, very good. Like, Rojanski's win over Will Fleury. I managed to catch a couple of his fights in the lead up to this. I don't think Karl Moore has probably ever faced a guy, definitely not light heavyweight anyway, who is as big and as strong as him, but fucking Rosinski looks it. Now, it'll be interesting to see him at the weigh-ins, who actually is bigger or stronger, but God almighty, he looks an absolute fucking tank, and he's fast as well, like Karl. They're very, very, very similar fighters, I think. I think Rosinski probably a little bit more wrestle heavy, Karl is probably a little bit better jiu-jitsu maybe, and they both hit very, very hard. God, this is a brilliant fight, to be fair. I know it's not, maybe it doesn't make the most sense in terms of the rankings and all of that, but as a fight, it's very, very good as well. It's a massive fight for Karl, isn't it? I know, Graeme, you gave him stick the last time. You said he was going to get knocked out in 5 seconds and all the last time. So you changing your tune coming into this or what?
I just said it was an uphill task. It was a big ask to come in against such a high level guy after so long out and injuries and things like that. But I've been watching Karl for a long time. Watching him fight in cage contender back in the day and things like that. And I definitely know what he can do. I've seen him, win Cage Warriors belt, fight for 2 belts. It obviously didn't work out. He was on the verge of the UFC. He's had some ups and downs along the way, but so his losses, you look at them, it was the step up to heavyweight in Cage Warriors and Paul Craig, and we all know about Paul Craig, and they were both undefeated, 5-0 and 6-0 at the time, and Karl Moore was actually winning that fight up until kind of story of Paul Craig's career. I suppose he was losing up until he won, but he's got a really good record. He's beaten Lee Chadwick. I know his opponent has too in a recent fight, but Lee Chadwick's a good win, and Karl Moore obviously proved that he's still got it, and that this time off he's improved. And if you look at his opponent's record here, he's got some good wins as well. Like that, he beat Will Fleury 2.5 years ago. That Will Fleury isn't the same Will Fleury as now. Like Will Fleury's really kind of been able to put it all together and really kind of believe in himself. And let his game go in there, and he's definitely become an improved fighter since then. But it's still a very, very good win. He's on a 4-fight win streak here. It's as you said, John is saying, he's kind of taking the slow roll to build himself back up after so long out. But this isn't, in my opinion, really a slow roll. This is just an unranked guy who, probably should be ranked or would be ranked if he'd fought more fights in Bellator, not just the one fight that he has in Bellator. So, yeah, I think this is a tough opponent. Colin Moore, obviously, Will Fleury said it to us. I said in the stream that I hadn't heard people talking a lot about all the improvements Colin Moore made, and Will Fleury typed in the chat that Carl had made big improvements, and we acknowledged that on the live stream. I think Carl might have missed that part of the stream, but
you were like shitting on him the whole time.
Yeah, I said he was going to get knocked out. He was going to get hit by a gust of wind and do the chicken dance.
You better clarify that's a joke there.
But yeah, this is a tough opponent if you're going to try and take the slow road. I do expect Carl to go in there and get it done. He's been in there against some really good guys, but if John Cavanagh's talking about taking the slow road, maybe he sees something in this fight that I don't see. But I think this is a tough opponent, and this is if Carl gets a win here, which I'd lean towards him doing. It would be a really big win in my opinion, and definitely not a kind of build-up fight.
Yeah, what I said there about the slow road, that wasn't fair, and maybe what John said, people go and listen to this better. He explained it over 2 or 3 minutes, but maybe like the building towards the top, maybe I explained it badly, but go and listen to what he said about it. But I agree though, in terms of I think Rozanski is actually a better fighter than Glixkis, who's, I'm not sure where he's ranked now, but it was ranked number 5 or 6 at the time. It's not as if Carl Moore is getting a knockdown an opponent or anything. In fact, I think he's getting a better opponent than a lot of the ranked guys, which happens sometimes in Bellator. Look at when Mansour Benoit came in, people think, this guy is unranked, but he's fucking better. He's probably the second, if not the best guy in Bellator at lightweight, and that can happen sometimes. I think Rozanski, win or lose here, I think he'll be in the top 10, top 15 in Bellator in the next year, so be very interesting.
Yeah, if you look at his last 4 fights, if he had fought and beat Will Fleury, Zakauskas, Pasternak and Chadwick in 4 fights in Bellator, he'd probably be ranked in the top 10. But because he's not done in Bellator, he's not ranked in the top 15.
100%. Let's talk about Kenny Mokahana against Craig McIntosh. The last fight here on the undercard. Obviously, we're going on him in a bit of a different row here. But McIntosh 3-4 now in his career. Kenny still only 4 fights into his career. So the matchmaking, I suppose it does make sense. This is going to be his first fight in Bellator. He's done, he's been around for a good while. He fought Chris Bungard back in 2016, made his debut back in 2014. Hasn't obviously fought that often, but has been fighting as an amateur since 2010. Still, what is he? He's still only, I think he's in his early 30s or something like that. I'm not sure exactly, but a guy who's been doing a lot of grappling, been doing a lot of stuff over the last few years, maybe apart from taking MMA fights. And look, you'd expect Kenny to go in here and win this fight. You talked about Franz Malambo there a few minutes ago. Franz, obviously Kenny's brother, and they've been training together, and they're as thick as thieves, it feels like, when they go to these cards and stuff. And Kenny, great character, turning up late to the weigh-ins and stuff the last time and barely making
right on time, wasn't that? Right on time, perfectly timed.
He's he's 4 fights in his career already. He beat Alex Bodner, who's a good, prospect coming through. He beat Adam Shelley, who's a good fighter as well. He's fighting Dean Barry coming up here now too. And you talk about amateurs as well, Graeme. Look at all the amateur fights that Kenny Mokahana has had, fighting Leon Hill, beating Leon Hill. He fought against John Mitchell a couple of times. He fought John Byrne, Ryan O'Connor, who's a very good amateur, Adam Novak, who's a very good amateur, and many, many more as well. Made his amateur debut back in 2015, fought as an amateur for 5 years. So very, very, Kenny's 4 fights, but how many fights does he actually have? 24 fights or something like that, or 20, something like that. Big fight for Kenny here as well, isn't it? To take yourself to 4-0 is one thing, take yourself to 5-0 is another thing. Get your second win in Bellator. Interesting time, but big time for the whole family as well, with friends signing on to fight over in PFL, Graeme.
Yeah, it's great. It's great for fans, as you mentioned. But Kenny, he made his Bellator debut. He looked like he belonged there. He went out there. He got the guillotine choke in the first round. Pretty much flawless performance. He's coming in here against a guy that he's probably looking to do a similar thing against. He'll probably be looking out there to put the pressure on him early and try and take him out early. And I expect him that'll probably be the case here. But if it does go long, we've seen him go long before, as you mentioned, as an amateur. People like John Mitchell, he's gone long against. He's finished Leon Hill with a submission. He's fought John Mitchell to decision twice. John Byrne, another really good guy who's a lot of fights at amateur. So, sometimes when these guys are making their pro debuts or their big promotion debuts, or they're early in their professional career, and they have a lot of quick finishes on their record, you kind of have a lot of questions about whether they can go long, or can they face adversity and stuff like that. But we've seen him do that before. We've seen him mold himself at amateur, take his time at amateur to get a lot of experience in there, and it looks like he's turned pro at the perfect time. He's managed to stay relatively injury free. It seems he's fighting regularly, staying in shape, staying on weight and all that stuff. That all helps. The confidence of being an undefeated fighter, is definitely another thing as well. So yeah, everything's going swimmingly for the Malambo brothers at the moment, and I expect it to continue here.
Indeed. We're not calling them Malambo brothers. The Malambo.
Yeah, sorry. The second I said that, I was like, what do I call them?
I don't know. They get Kenny and Friends. It feels like they'd make for a good buddy cop movie or something.
A reality TV show.
Do you know, Dublin people always use this phrase, I was bouncing around. Do you know that phrase? The two lads literally bounced into the fucking wings. The last time when I was there, I was like, okay, that's what I mean now about bouncing
after
around.
Speeding down the bus lanes because of the Dublin traffic. Fucking Dublin traffic. I don't know how they didn't see that coming living in Dublin. Always expected Dublin traffic.
Oh, it's the worst. I remember one time it was a Bellator media day, and it was on in St. Stephen's Green, is that what it's called, the shopping centre in the middle?
Yeah.
Wasn't it TGI Fridays is there? Isn't it? Is that there? But anyway, we parked there and we drove from there to the Gibson, which is 2 miles, maybe 3 miles, not even that much, and it took us 2 hours to drive there. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? It did. It was ridiculous. It was fucking ridiculous. Fucking Dublin, I hate it. I'm parking up on Thursday morning.
If you take a wrong turn in Dublin and you get stuck in this loop of no right turn, no left turn, you're just driving around in a massive circle. And
it's the worst place on earth. I'm going in, parking on the underground of the Gibson Hotel on Thursday morning. I'm leaving on Sunday morning, the exact same car parking space, not going further than the fucking Tree Arena. I'll go to Camille, I'll go to Ruby's, I might go to that bar behind it to watch the Man United Barcelona match. I'm not going any further than that. That's Dublin to me, that area there. Will I get killed there, Graeme? Is there any chance?
with your bad mouthing of Dublin, if the wrong person hears it, you might get might get shot up, or you might get you might catch a few rights and a few lefts.
Catch a few digs inside there. It's lovely.
Sure, if somebody was bad mouthing Limerick as much as you are, you wouldn't want to be hanging around the city.
Dublin deserves it though. Dublin deserves it. Anyway, let's move on. We're nearly an hour in already. We haven't even got to the main
You've
car.
given out your locations and everything. You're where exactly you're going to be. Name the places and everything. So any angry punters, you know where he's going to be.
I'll give out the fucking haircut next.
Here, I'll send you my live location.
I got to be at the Wins on Friday morning. Anyway, Kieran Clark and Leonardo Sinitz. I talked to Kieran maybe 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, and I was talking about, Jesus, Kieran, it must be great to have an opponent named, you won't have a late change or anything like that, touch wood, and asked him that question. And then what happens about 3 days after, or maybe a little bit more?
How naive.
How naive.
Have you not been watching him for the last few minutes?
Have you not been paying attention? But yes, Keir Harvey falls out and he fights against Leonardo Sinitz. Do you know what? I went and looked for a bit of Sinitz. I couldn't find much, and maybe I'll have a deeper look. I didn't really have as much time in the last couple of days, but look, a big change again for Kieran Clark. Interviewing him, I've interviewed him a little bit before at media days and stuff, but never sat down for half an hour to talk to him. And God Almighty, he's just a lovely fella. Like he just comes across as a normal lad who, you know, has had
salt of the earth
type of lad. You know, had a tough life. You know, single mother and stuff, and you know, really no bullshit about him. Like still came up, you know, trying to protect his brother, and his brother trying to protect him, I suppose, as well. You know, learned how to fight to do that, to protect himself and his family and all. And the way he spoke about it was just really
never dodge fights, always take the hard fights, you know, going in there against 8-1 guys in your third fight and things like that. Like, you know, Gene and Doy, like, you know, that's a tough fight to be taken in your third fight. And, you know, he's as you mentioned when you interview him, you know, he's no bullshit. He's going to tell you what he thinks. And, you know, he's just singularly focused on, you know, making this career as much as he can and putting everything he can into it. And that's the attitude you got to have in this game. There's a lot of guys chasing a dream, and you got to make it happen for yourself. And you know, he is making it happen. He's a fucking nightmare to fight against, like a nightmare matchup for a lot of people. And you know, I don't know much about this guy coming in on short notice, but for Kieran Clark, even though it's a change in opponent at the last minute, his game plan probably doesn't change. He's going to go in and do what he does, and you know, it's very hard to stop.
100%. Like, as well, I'm sure he won't want it to be like the last few fights, you know, where he goes in there, he gets clipped and has to fight his way back. But to be able to have proven that to yourself, that that's something you can do, is a massive thing in your career, because like it almost gives you the freedom to go out there and put out your game. And I spoke to him about this as well, like to kind of be free out there. Look, if it does go badly, I hope it doesn't, but if it does, I know I have the fucking intestinal fortitude to get through it and to, you know, to survive it, I suppose. And it almost gives you that freedom to go out and throw your own shots and land your own shots. And for Kieran, he hasn't really been able to show that in the last few fights because the start of the fights have gone badly, but he's spoken about wanting to show his striking and his all-around game, and not just maybe his heart or his ability to come through the fire, beat them with his cardio and his ability and his heart and grit and all that, and show his skill as well. And I think that's what he will be expected and wanting here. You know, I think a 3 or 4 minute win would be something he'd like here, you know, rather than 15 minutes of grit. But that's not always possible. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. Again, the big crowd coming down from Drogheda as well be massive for Kieran Clark and massive for Bellator as well. If he goes to 7-0, Bellator have been wanting to push him, and I think they'll be pushing him even further after that. So big fight for Kieran Clark.
Sometimes it's a little bit like worrying when guys are, I want to show this, and you know, if you're you know, take Irish examples, if you're like James Gallagher was a good example. People were saying, like we were saying at the time, you know, he should be trying to fight more like Gunnar Nelson than trying to fight like Conor. Because that's his strength. And you know, Kieran Clark's gone in there and tried to strike with people and maybe got himself in a little bit of trouble as a pro. You know, he's obviously had an extensive amateur career. He's had wins and losses. He's had close decisions. He's gone the distance and stuff like that. Like he's been in adversity. He's overcome and stuff like that. And then he's proven to himself, as you mentioned, that he can do it against pros. He can do it, you know, in front of the big crowd, the big moments and stuff like that. But yeah, I hope he just takes what's there best for his game, and rather than going out there and trying to prove something, prove a certain aspect of the game like striking, I hope he just, you know, you can take the guy down, grind on him, beat him up, and then, you know, show your striking when he's worn down, probably a safer way to do it. So yeah, I expect Kieran to go and win here, but I don't like when guys are talking, I want to go out and show this, I want to go out and show this certain aspect of their game that maybe people haven't seen before. But you know, hopefully, you know, it'll probably be nothing to worry about here, but you know, that does put a little bit in my mind of I hope he doesn't go out there trying to, you know, go for the knockout and, you know, get himself in a little bit of trouble that he doesn't have to get himself into. Yeah, and maybe I overstated that as well. Like he did mention it once in a post fight and or in a pre-fight maybe, but like I think that's the thing that everyone kind of maybe thinks or says that, like, hopefully it goes well and I can showcase this. But yeah, and proven to the fans and all, like, just go out there and win, and your record will, your wins will speak for themselves, and you can, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I think Peter Queally is the type of guy who has gotten to that mindset as well over the last while in terms of just trying to go out and win, and it really paid off for him with his career, but with his career in Bellator as well. You know, there was the talks of going to the UFC, and I remember when I interviewed him, asked him about that, and kind of saying, Jesus, was this the biggest blessing in disguise you've ever had? And he was like, I never really thought of it that way, but I suppose it was. Like if he was in the UFC, you know, he probably would have had a few fights, got on well, maybe had got a few more fights, and or maybe ended up, like someone like a Reece McKee got a couple of fights and got cut or something like that, and it would have been hard to find a way back. Yet he goes to Bellator, he fights and beats Patricky, then he fights Patricky for the title, then he's fighting fucking Benson Henderson. Like, it'd be very hard to think he'd have 3 fights as big as that in the UFC if he had gotten there. Plus, he has this massive Irish crowd behind him. He has the song, he has the walkout. Like, Peter Queally's turned into a special fighter for Ireland, and I think, I'm delighted.
He's built a really
happened.
nice brand for himself. He's done really well for himself, and he's been in some exciting fights. And obviously, the Patricky, back-to-back fights with Patricky are huge fights. And you followed it up with the Benson Henderson one, and it obviously didn't go well, and maybe wasn't the most exciting fight. But that was a huge fight in Irish MMA history. And Benson Henderson's an absolute legend, a former UFC champion. And if we think back to not that long ago, only a handful of years ago, going in there against a UFC champion who's not who's still at a really high level and in a huge event in Dublin, that would be something that Peter Queally, probably would have been beyond his wildest dreams. So, yeah, I think he can definitely be, happy with how things have worked out, even if, a couple of losses and things like that, he'd obviously want to take back. But as a whole, I think it's worked out brilliantly for Peter Queally. Obviously, the walkout tune, as you mentioned, really gets the crowd going. People love it. People are waiting for that song, and while they're at the event, they're waiting for Peter Queally's walkout. It's a big part of the event, and if Peter Queally wasn't fighting on the card, that walkout and that energy that a Peter Queally fight brings wouldn't be the same.
100%. And then you have to look at the next step, because this is the next step, because he'll still have the walk on, he'll still have all of that, but he doesn't have, the questions come into the last fight are what's it like to fight Benson Henderson? What's it like to fight a former UFC champion, a legend, a guy you probably looked up to on the way up? Before that, what's it like to fight for the title? You're fighting in a rematch. This is a massive fight. And here it's how much do you know about the guy you're fighting kind of job? One of them. And for both of these guys, because Bryce Logan as well, he's 12-7 in his career, but he's coming off of 3 losses in his last 3 in Bellator, and this is a big mental challenge for him as well, because if he loses this, he could very well be cut for going 0-4 in any promotion. We know what that means. We all know what that means.
He went to a split decision with Georgie Karakanian, though, so he can definitely fight.
I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying if it's 4 losses in a row, you know what happens then. And you look at Queally, then he's lost the 2 big ones. He's lost the 2 biggest fights of his career in his last 2 fights. For a guy, right, who's been around for a long time, who's 37 years of age, there's 2 ways that goes, right? This is either the last embers of your career, or you go in there and you fight a guy like Benson Henderson and you think, Benson Henderson looks like just a better version of Peter Queally in almost every area. Having watched that fight and analysing it coming in and afterwards as well. Some people have that and they realise that and they kind of fall away. Some people have that, they see it and they realise, right, these are the improvements I have to make and the extra work. Now, Peter Queally, how much extra work can he put in? As you just said, he's a Trojan worker, but he also doesn't seem like the type of guy who has the mindset to give up or anything like that. So I think mindset will be a big factor in this fight. And look, I don't know too much about Bryce Logan's mindset, but I feel like I know a bit about Peter Queally's mindset, and I think that will be positive and good. But that's a big key here. And I'll probably ask him about it at the media day, but it's probably after the fight that we'll know more about that. A fighter doesn't admit that sort of thing before the fights, I say, but coming off of those 2 massive fights and now fighting, Bryce Logan, I've watched a bit of him, he's a good fighter and all of that, but it's not Benson Henderson, it's not Patricky Pitbull, it's not even, Ryan Scope was a big fight, but he was supposed to fight Bryn Primus in between there. Even the Miles Price fight was a massive fight. This is the fight in Bellator that it's probably, the lowest ebb coming into in terms of the name, in terms of the matchup and all of that. And that's a big mental hurdle to overcome, just to be able to perform like that at this stage of your career after having those massive fights before it. So it's big for Queally. What do you think of that, in terms of...
Yeah, it's something I didn't even think about, but yeah, it definitely is, and it definitely makes sense. And coming in against Bryce Logan, this is a huge chance for Bryce Logan. I'm sure he's thinking of it like that. And for Queally, he's kind of expected to go in there and look good and win, and to step down, as you mentioned, from from Pitbull and Henderson fights. Can he get it's only natural, he's only human. Can he get the same level of excitement going? As you said, he's definitely, as we both mentioned, he's definitely a ridiculously hard worker, but mentality in terms of coming from 3 of the biggest fights in your life, or even the fight before that against Ryan Scope, it was a huge fight for him, kind of building towards getting in the title picture, and now you're kind of, you have to rebuild again. And he, as you mentioned, he's what is he, 37? Did you say?
Yeah, he is 37.
Yeah. So it's definitely be only natural to kind of not feeling the same kind of excitement and focus as before. But only he'll know that. Maybe it'll maybe he learned a little from the Henderson fight, that he can kind of make Henderson is not afraid of making a fight really boring, just to make sure he wins it. I think Queally maybe could, implement a bit more of that in this fight to get the decision. Maybe Bellator won't like that and won't give him a step up in competition if he does that. But to get safe wins in Bellator, Peter Queally probably could go about taking a leaf out of Benson Henderson's fight, even if it is a bit boring to watch Ben Henderson these days.
I watched Tito Ortiz versus Chuck Liddell the other day, and it was the famous take a book out of his chapter fight. I was like, oh, there it is. There's the line. I think we kind of got half one of him there from you, did we? Maybe not. But
you're one of the greatest light heavyweights of the night.
That was Tito. No, it was Mike Goldberg said the book out of his chapter. It was Tito
not in the ring interviewing Babalu, and he was like, you're one of the greatest fighters of the night.
And there was a great video going around of that. It was like pursed lips.
It kept popping up, purse lips.
Absolutely fucking hilarious. Fedor Emelianenko. Tito was some man. Anyway.
But there was literally about 4 or 5 minutes of fuck ups from about 8 minutes of work.
Yeah. It was so funny. Josh Barnett was fighting that night as well, wasn't he, interviewing him? Anyway, imagine employing Tito Ortiz to speak. How fucking idiotic can someone be? Sinead Kavanagh, Janae Harding. Big fight for Sinead, as we said, with Norbert Navigny earlier on, coming back from a bad knee injury. Sinead's been out for a good bit, and that will be a big step to overcome. She was supposed to fight Cyborg. Probably look a blessing in disguise. That's not happened straight away now to work her way back in. But she's fighting Janae Harding, and this will, I think, probably help the mentality, because, look, she fought Janae Harding before, ended up losing that fight via cut and a doctor stoppage. So she'll want to get that back. So, look, if the matchmaking maybe doesn't make as much sense, you're going from a title fight to a girl who's, 6 and 7, I think, or something like that, in her career, you'd say, oh, what's going on there? But this does make sense, I suppose, in that terms. The first fight, look, the cut first of all and the finish. John Gavin is not the type of guy who I think goes against fighter safety or doctors or judges or referees or anything. But the way he shook his head after this fight was stopped to the doctor, I think, kind of says it all. Big John said it on commentary. I think a lot of people said it was one of those cuts. It was a bad cut, but the cutman, Big John, made a great point. The cutman wasn't given the full minute to stop the cut bleeding, and the doctor looked at it before he was given that and stopped the fight. Made absolutely no sense. This fight could have gone on. It went one round. In my opinion, Sinead Kavanagh was absolutely boxing her up. Now, Big John in commentary thought the opposite, and maybe he knows more than me, so I'm not a god here at all. But I thought Sinead was by far the better fighter. Now, having watched Sinead since then, obviously she fought Leah McCourt. I think her boxing has actually improved, so maybe that won't be the case coming in here. I think it'll be a tougher fight this time for Sinead Kavanagh, but you'd still expect her to win, I think, with the boxing. But as I said, with the knee. Big fight in a big spot here for Sinead. Massive opportunity for our 2022 Irish Female Fighter of the Year. Good. I expect this to be a good fight. Graeme, Janae came in and struck with her last time. If she does that again, Sinead Kavanagh is not a type of person to have a boring fight if it's on the feet, and I don't think this will be one either.
Yeah, exactly. And Sinead probably feels a bit sour about how the doctor stoppage happened. Obviously, she thinks she was winning the fight. I think most people who watched the fight thought she was winning the fight, and obviously she got cut. And as you mentioned, the protocol that we usually see wasn't followed, and Sinead's had a few kind of unfortunate things like that happen in her career, and even in her last fight against Leah McCord, like a huge fight, a lot of jeopardy there, a lot on the line, and she goes in there and tears her ACL and adapts her game and kind of shows a part of her game that people kind of questioned over the years, because she's coming from boxing and she's a big striker, a really technical striker and stuff. People kind of, and it was probably true at the start of her career that she kind of wasn't as well rounded in the grappling sense as maybe some of her opponents. But the equalizer was her hands. But now she's shown us over recent fights that she is well rounded now, and she can wrestle, she can grapple, and went in there against Leah McCord on one leg, and mixed up the game plan because of the injury. Adapted and overcame, and got a huge win there. And you kind of mentioned that she was getting the title shot. I don't know if this is me being cynical, but I think, Scott Coker was quick to, we're going to give Sinead the title fight, even though she'd just been like carried out of there with a clear ACL injury. So, it's easy to say, we were going to give you the title shot when that there's no chance she's going to be ready for that title shot. But
poor old Scott Coker to accuse him.
What do you think? Am I just cooking up a conspiracy theory here, or do you think I might be onto something?
I'd never thought of that before, but maybe it's something
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
If I was in Scott Coker's position, that'd be a big brain decision to make right at that point. I think that's fucking smart if he did do that, to be honest.
He's been around a long time, he's promoted a lot of MMA shows.
Maybe we don't give him enough credit, but I would say no, I don't believe it, but I kind of hope it is true, because that's really big branding on Scott Coker to say so. But look, it's an interesting fight here for Sinead, big fight.
Injury is a big thing to overcome, as we said earlier, though. How much is that in her head? How much can she trust it? Is she going to be wary of taking some kicks on that? Is Janae Harding going to think, I'm going to target this? Will that play into it? I think Sinead will have too much for her, but yeah, there's definitely always an extra question when the fighter's coming back from a major injury like that, especially a major injury to the knee. And we've talked about knee injuries a lot on the podcast. It seems to happen a lot, but yeah, it's it's definitely a factor coming back off a big injury. It definitely is. It definitely plays into it must play into your head, and it definitely is something your opponent can target, and maybe something that could flare up, or even if you're standing kind of differently or moving differently to try and compensate for your knee, subconsciously you can end up injuring other parts of your leg. I know that from personal experience with coming back from ACL surgeries, that you end up injuring your hamstring and your quads and stuff and your calves and stuff like that. So yeah, Sinead, she knows her opponent. She's fought her before. Yeah, Janae Harding's definitely improved, but I think Sinead has shown, from what I've seen, bigger improvements. Especially as I mentioned in her kind of grappling and wrestling side of her game, and I expect her to go in there and win and kind of avenge that unfortunate situation. What was it? Nearly 4.5 years ago.
Yeah. Do you know what she needs? This will sound like an ad now, right? But a new mattress. I got a new mattress there yesterday. And
are you taking money on the side, are you?
No, I won't say where I bought it. So, but I have a terrible shoulder. Everyone knows that. Woke up this morning and I was throwing right hands like fucking Mark Hunt or something. It was perfect. No sore back or nothing. A new mattress, honestly.
What did you get? A medium or a hard or
I like a hard mattress. I couldn't sleep in. I hate soft beds. I'm going to Dublin here now, and the bed's going to be lovely.
Do you ever sit on a soft one and you just sink into it? Yeah. It's oh my god, what the fuck's going on?
I hate it. I'm not going to sleep for 3 days here. I can't sleep in hotels. I can't sleep in soft beds. It's just not a thing. And I was like, this is not, I'm talking to the missus, this is non-negotiable. We're getting a fucking hard bed. There's a bit of softness on top of it, but it is one of these ones where it is lumps on it, but they mold around your body when you go on it, and then it's hard on top of you. Oh my god, it's the most comfortable bed I've ever seen. And there's two things I'm picky about, Graeme: beds and coleslaw, right? And If I didn't like this bed, I'd
so sick. Any kind of mayonnaise related thing.
Oh, you don't like any coleslaw, do you? No coleslaw. Do you like ranch sauce?
No, it's absolutely disgusting.
I'm glad you said that. It's vile shit.
Anything that like resembles in any way mayonnaise.
Yeah. That's fair enough. Do you ever have Japanese mayonnaise though? That's a fucking game changer.
I never want anything to do with mayonnaise anywhere near me.
I've just discovered your hatred for mayonnaise and I kind of like it. I like it, to be fair. You love coffee though. How does anyone like coffee? Coffee's worse than mayonnaise.
Oh, some people put sugar in coffee. It's just like mental. It's meant to be bitter drink. Like drink it properly or
I remember the first time I met you, you bought me a coffee and I was like, what's this? What are you giving me this for? I didn't even take it off. I was just like, keep that there. I don't want that. I think you gave it away to fucking Niall McGrath or someone like that. I was like, hold on to that coffee.
Sure, I probably just sculled the one I had in my hand and drank that one. Probably know me.
I've never seen do you know what? You're fucking like mentally insane. I've never seen someone scull drinks as quickly as you do. Like I
didn't even drink coffee before. I used to drink tea, and then waiting around for Connor like years and years ago, just fucking Gav and Paddy be like, let's go for a coffee, and I just go for a coffee, and then I'm just like sitting around drinking coffees in a coffee shop, waiting for the man to arrive.
Remember last time we went for a few drinks, and you got a strawberry daiquiri, and you drank the strawberry daiquiri in literally 11 seconds. Like you just
that one in fairness was like 90% ice, but yeah.
But like, why would you not drink that over like 15 minutes? Why would you drink it in like 11 seconds?
I'm trying to get a job done. Let's get it done.
We went for 2 drinks. You weren't trying to get
I drink like cider a lot as well. It just tastes like soda. You can just like, you know yourself. You can drink a can of soda in 1 minute. Like
soda. What are you, fucking American?
Yeah, soda. Well, this is an international podcast, Sean. We have to accommodate for our friends across the pond.
Cider is the only alcoholic beverage.
What do you call it? Fizzy pop.
Fizzy pop. Minerals. It's minerals. That's what
minerals.
Yeah, minerals. Have an old mineral with the
fizzy drink. Fizzy drink.
Fizzy drink's okay, but I like minerals.
Minerals. Like working in the hotel trade or something.
No, that's what it is.
Restaurant trade.
I have a diet Coke, a diet mineral. You know, a bit of a mineral.
I'd love a diet mineral.
I'll tell you a funny story. It was we went to America, right?
What the fuck are we even talking about here? Mattresses and fucking daiquiris and fucking in the middle of our Bellator breakdown.
We went to America, right? And we ordered this big fucking meal, and my aunt ordered a diet soda. And I was sitting there thinking, like, diet soda, that could be fucking anything. What did they? And they brought her like a Diet Coke, and she was just like, grand, like just order a diet soda. But also they came to our house, right? And she'd only drink water from bottles, and this was Ireland in the fucking 90s now. I think this was a good few years ago. And I remember my mother brought they were there for 2 weeks. She bought like 24-pack of water, and when they were drank, she just filled them at the tap and put them back in and fucking replaced them, and they were drinking tap water for the fucking 2 weeks.
Where was she from?
She's from America, but she was originally Irish. Like, she lived in Ireland for fucking...
See, in fairness, like, if you actually go to different countries, I'm not sure about Ireland to America. If you drink the water in some countries, it fucking destroys your insides.
That is true, but she was grand anyway. But
maybe she's had some prior experience with massive constipation or diarrhea for drinking water.
The more I think of it, that's fair enough. But also, we're in Newcastle West, like, we have the Ballygown water coming for our taps, so our water is fucking beautiful. We have the best water in Ireland. Anyway, let's get back to Bellator. We've 2 fights to go, and we're an hour and 20 minutes into this fucking podcast. Pedro Carvalho against Jeremy Kennedy. Look, if it wasn't for the main event, this is probably to be the most high-level fight in the card. A brilliant fight. Pedro Carvalho. Jesus, the wins he's had recently. I've said this a couple of times now, Graeme, but I think it's worth repeating. I remember we were on the podcast, and it was after the Sam Cecilia fight in 2019. So that's coming up on 4 years ago. And I remember posing the question at the time, was Pedro Carvalho the best fighter fighting out of Ireland at that time? And, there was, maybe apart from McGregor or whatever. And at the time, I think there was definitely that possibility. There's probably another few people, whoever it might have been at the time. I'll mention no names just in case I offend anyone. But he was top 5 without a shadow of a doubt, arguably number 1. That was 4 years ago, right? 4 years ago, and Pedro Carvalho is only 27 now. this guy is a young guy who's been improving an awful lot since then. Okay, he's had losses since then, but he's had some very good wins too. Like, he's lost Patricio Wilson and Nijelski, which we mentioned earlier, but the win over Daniel Weichel was a massive win. The win over Mads Burnell was one of the best Irish wins of all time outside of McGregor. Well, probably the best when you think about it. Massive win, and he's done nothing but improved since then. And this is a guy I think we probably underappreciate in Pedro Carvalho fighting out of Ireland, to have someone that high level. And he goes in here against Jeremy Kennedy, right, who, okay, he won against Aaron Pico last time out, but look, if anyone who watched that fight knows Pico got a shoulder injury and it wasn't the normal win you would expect. But he beat Emmanuel Sanchez before that, a very good fighter. He's been the likes of Steven Seiler and others as well in his career. Very good fighter, and this is a good fight. He fought Alexander Volkanovski in the UFC a few years ago as well, and he did end up losing that fight, but he's had fights in the UFC and fought some good names in the UFC. Was booked to fight Josh Emmett, who just fought for the title, was booked to fight Mirsad Bektic. Does didn't end up happening, but he fought Honey Jason and Kyle Bochniak and a few others as well. He's a guy who's been around the block for a good long time now at this stage, having made his debut back in 2013, 10 years since he started fighting. Big task for Pedro, but well able for it, I think. Like, when you look at Jeremy Kennedy, he's a strong wrestler, but he has power as well. I think he's 7 wins or something like that via knockout and 2 submissions. A lot of decisions in there as well, but he can grind a guy out. He will grind a guy out. But you look at this fight and you look at the Nijelski fight and think, right, Pedro, you've had the Nijelski fight to prepare for this fight. You also look at Kennedy and you go, look, the Sanchez fight, Sanchez isn't a million miles away from Pedro and the way he fights. I think Sanchez probably a little bit bigger with the output. Pedro probably a little bit of a better technical striker, although I have a lot of respect for Sanchez as well. And, so maybe we'll see that fight someday. We'll check that. But that's a very interesting matchup. The ability not only to wrestle from Kennedy's point of view, but to stop it from Pedro's point of view. And then we have the striking, and we've seen how Kennedy beat a guy in Sanchez who you would say resembles Pedro in certain ways anyway with the striking. And Pedro has, gone in there against Mads Burnell, who is one of the best grapplers in the world at featherweight, and beaten him in his last fight. This is a very, very interesting fight in many different ways, I suppose, and a huge one for Pedro, isn't it, Graeme? Because he's back in title mix if he wins this.
Yeah, you mentioned, like, we were talking about Pedro coming into that Pitbull fight years ago, and I think we even said at the time that it might have come a little bit too early for him. He's obviously was very young. He's still very young, and he was very kind of young in his career, even though he had experience. He was still, you could see he was still working on certain aspects of his game. He's a bit too wide open. He was a bit too hittable. He still had some evolving to do. And, the win against Daniel Weichel, it looked like, it was a huge win for him. But I think the Mads Burnell, the style in which he did it, the fact that he went in there and nullified the threats that Mads, we've seen him possess. We've seen him, use to great effect against loads of people in the past, like a really experienced guy as well. And Pedro kind of broke him. He by the end, it was only going one way. Mads just had no way of getting back into the fight. Everything he was trying to do was just nullified. And it was a really brilliant performance by Pedro. And I think after that fight, you could see the confidence that he has now in his game, that he really believes in what he's doing. And you see he's tightened up certain things that maybe made him, stutter in those fights we talked about before, that kind of possibly came too early for him. Now it looks like he's ready. He's in a big spot. He's here. He's in the co-main event. He's in against, as you mentioned, the guy who's been in the big shows, a guy who's, fought in front of big crowds and stuff like that as well. And, a guy who's fought against some top level guys. And it's a difficult fight, but so was the Mads Burnell fight. And he looked phenomenal in that. So, Pedro, it's definitely no easy fight. It's definitely a big ask, but he's looked phenomenal. He looked phenomenal in that Mads Burnell fight, and he really seems to be putting it together. Sometimes it just starts to click for guys like Will Fleury is another guy who it seems to have clicked for recently, and I think it's clicked for Pedro, and he's tightened up the kind of flaws, the obvious flaws in his game, and he's now a really, really difficult fight for everybody in this division.
Massive fight for Pedro and a massive fight for the division as well. Looking forward to seeing that one. Look at a massive fight for the division of welterweight as well in the main event, as we have the first of two welterweight unification bouts in Ireland that are going to be happening in the next 6 weeks or so. We have the Cage Warriors one coming up, but next Saturday night we have Yaroslav Amosov fighting Logan Storley for the Bellator MMA welterweight championship. Amosov obviously was over in his native Ukraine fighting the war against Russia. Logan Storley fought MVP for the interim title while Amosov was off doing that. Won that fight in our robbery of the year from last year, a very contentious, close decision, but he did win it, and they will fight here. This is the second time they have fought. The first time Amosov again won a pretty contentious, close decision. That time Logan Storley had his back and was almost choking him towards the end of that one. That was the third round. It was a 3-round fight. Be very interesting to see how a 5-round fight goes. Look, at the story of that first fight was interesting, but it's also, I don't know how much it'll play into this one, because 5 rounds is a big thing, but also Storley is pretty young in his career and I think has improved an awful lot since then. I wonder, is that a key? Because he's 30 years of age now, Storley. That fight was in 2020, so it was late 2020, so it's only been 2-ish years since that. But he looked good on the feet against Neiman Gracie. He's definitely improved his striking. He's definitely improved a good bit in that time. And has Amosov, because Amosov, as I said, he was off in the Ukraine. He probably wasn't able to train at all. He was fighting a fucking war, for God's sake, for a good few months, and that's a big issue for him coming in here as well. So if they're very even the last time, you would think Storley might have the advantage coming into this one. Just to describe the fight as well, I suppose, the first one, Storley was going for takedown after takedown after takedown, couldn't get him, and then Amosov ended up taking him down a couple of times. I wouldn't say dominated on the ground or anything like that, but you could see that his wrestling was more effective in that fight. But Storley's jiu-jitsu, I think, was a little bit better, and he was able to scramble well, and when he did kind of get the fight to the ground himself or got in a better position on the ground, he looked more dangerous than Amosov then. Then on the feet, Amosov looked slightly better. I think he was a better technical fighter, where Storley had probably the little bit more power, but Amosov didn't look the most technical striker in the world. But it was one of those matchups where Amosov against most people and Storley against most people look devastating as a wrestler, and their striking is kind of used behind that, whereas in this they didn't look devastating as a wrestler because the other wrestler was so fucking good, and then they were forced to maybe show more of their striking than they'd want to. As I said again, by the end, Storley almost had the finish late, but Amosov had done enough to win the fight on the judges' scorecards. But will Storley be able over 5 rounds to put on the same sort of pace he put on over 3 rounds there and maybe tire Amosov out? Who knows? I think the tactics of this one will be very, very interesting. What way do you see it, Graeme? I know it's this old school wrestler versus wrestler matchup that might turn into a striking match. If it's 5 rounds and they're fighting a lower pace, maybe it might turn into a little bit of a boring fight, but also the last fight was really exciting and really good. So if we're to look at that one and say, oh, this one's going to be boring, it might be a little bit unfair. So I'm honestly, I'm not sure how this one will go in terms of how it'll go as a fight, but in terms of who will win either. Have you any indication who you think might take it?
It's probably going to end up being really close rounds, kind of like it was in the first fight. And in the first fight, Storley kind of did, he started to win the fight, but a little bit too late. And that was a 3-round fight, so maybe he figured out something that can help him. It was a couple of years ago now, though, as well. But as you mentioned, Amosov hasn't really been as active, even though they are both coming off really good wins. Obviously Douglas Lima, we all know about Douglas Lima and Michael Venom Page. They're 2 very good wins. These guys will both be very confident going in there. But yeah, I think it's probably going to be really close decisions, a really close decision with really close rounds. But I for some reason, I think Logan Storley's going to win it. But as you said, can he kind of put the pace that he put in the first fight and that he likes to put in a 5-round decision against a really good wrestler, where it's probably not going to be able to find too many moments to rest. Sometimes you can take a guy down and get on top and kind of put your weight on him and kind of take a little breather, but I don't think Amosov's going to give him many of them opportunities. It's a hard one to pick, but yeah, I think it's going to be a close one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very, very, very close as well. And as you said, close close rounds, not just the close fight. Like, Jesus Christ. I'm kind of going to be glad that I will be at cage side and I won't be able to watch the fight closely enough to give my judging analysis of this, because I think it will be one. I really do think it'll be one of those that will be 5 rounds and will be a close decision. But, do you know, I'm looking forward to it. And after our initial 5 minutes of giving out, I think
just a prediction of what percentage of fans will be left if it is a 5-round decision when the decision's being read out.
30%? What do you think?
That's high. When the decision's been read out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Jesus. 10, 15.
Yeah. If it's like a stand-up kind of, or else one of them dominates the wrestling and it turns into a boring fight, 10 or 15 possibly, but
if it's a barn burner, that 30 to 50 might be more like that. Yeah. But if it's not a great fight,
what percentage of people do you think will be there for the start of the fight?
If Pedro, I think it depends a lot on if Pedro wins or not and how the night is gone. They wouldn't want to wait around too long and make the people wait too long. They want to get those fighters out of there, have them ready to go the second that decision's read. Definitely. It depends on how the card's gone. Like if Jeremy Kennedy's gone in there and get his hand raised, it'd probably be the majority of people walking straight out.
I'm skeptical. I hope they don't, because I do think it will be a good fight. But I'm not 100%.
DJ Linderman versus Mike Hayes that the fight?
That's the one that Andrew McGann's always talking about, that one, isn't he? So it's the
rematch that nobody wanted.
We'll see. I wonder how many of the media members will be there for Yaroslav Amosov's scrum afterwards, fucking an hour after the fight ends, 5 minutes before the fucking Gibson closes to get a point. That's what
probably not us.
Well, we will be. We'll be the only fucking
I don't know. It depends. They want to get him out quick.
Give us Scott Coker before the main event, and we'll be.
He doesn't speak English. Great.
No, not a shame. We no. There's no. There's no Ukrainian translation. Shucks. We'll catch him next time, Graeme. We'll catch him next time. We'll be fine, but sure. We'll leave it there, lads. We'll leave it there. So we've gone on too long. We're not going to be talking about the UFC and all that. No Q&A either this week. We will be back with that next week after Bellator Dublin. We're going to have a mega Q&A. So we'll have something extra for you this week. But anyway, even if we don't, just Thursday, the YouTube is going to be absolutely packed. I'm going to be live streaming the weigh-ins Friday morning. All going well. It should be grand, but the last 2 times it was grand anyway. I'll be doing the live commentary and that. Join me at, I think it's, here, hold on, I have it right here. It is, I'll tell you now, 9 a.m. Friday morning for the live weigh-ins on the SevereMMA YouTube. I will be doing the bit of the golf commentary over that. Yeah. So that will be fun. Get into the comment section there, and we'll be all over that. As I said, follow myself, Graeme, Andy will be there on the night covering the event as well. So if you see us around, give us an old wave, give us an old hug, give us an old hello. Also, Graeme, I've 2 t-shirts left. If anyone wants one, let me know. I've two large t-shirts, I think. If you're in Dublin, I might just give it to you. First come, first serve. But let me know before Dublin so I don't be bringing them with me. So let me know if you're around Dublin, maybe around the fucking media there or something like that. If you can drop into the Gibson, I'll meet you there. I'll give it to you. Let me know. All right, we leave it there. Thanks
before
everyone.
Before you go, if you're gagging for a bit of a UFC reaction, there'll be the Severe takeaways up on the YouTube channel, and check that out and hit subscribe while you're there. We're nearly at 30,000. As I mentioned last week, we're growing our YouTube channel a lot over the last year. We've doubled or more our subscribers, and there's loads of content going up there that you're missing out on if you're not subscribed. And head on over there and check that out if you're expecting a UFC fight night breakdown and you're not getting one.
100%. Yeah, we'll have it there. So the lads are absolutely brilliant. Harry, the best analyst in the game. Spencer, been around for a long time and knows everyone on the card better than anyone, so they're better at us than doing it. And do you know what? The fights are actually going on right now as we're recording this. I didn't think they were on that fucking early, but these things happen in MMA. So we leave it there, lads. Also, for anyone going to the card, here we go. Last thing. The card starts at 4:30 p.m. on Saturday, 9 p.m. main card. The doors are open at 4 p.m. Is that right? Let me just look here again. 4 p.m. the doors are open, I think. Yeah, so get down there, lads. We'll see you around. Enjoy the card. Follow at SevereMMA, follow at Sean Sheehan BA, and all of that for all the good stuff all week. Follow our Instagram as well, SevereMMA.com. Another thing that has trebled since last Bellator card, trebled Instagram. We've trebled actually the weekly fucking listeners to this podcast, so shout out to everyone here. We've trebled the YouTube subscribers as well. So an absolutely massive few months for us, and we appreciate every single one of you. As I said last time, don't be a fucking freeloader. Click subscribe. Even if you sign up to the Patreon if you want. That's not a freeloader, but click subscribe. If you're not subscribed here and you're listening to this, you're a fucking freeloader. Subscribe. Come on, give us a subscribe. Spotify, iTunes, wherever you are, it's free. It's free. So do it.
And if you are subscribed, you're the best. And
you are the best. We love you. Graeme will give you personally a big hug if you meet you. So. Right, Graeme, this is the longest podcast I think we've had since the fucking McGahan days. So sign us out there, Graeme. Give us a quote for the week.
I'll give you a long one just to fit in with the podcast.
Go on.
He got a custom Continental. He got an Eldorado too. He got a 32 gun in his pocket for fun. He got a razor in his shoe. And he's bad Leroy Brown, the baddest man in the whole damn town.
We'll see you next week.